Tiana was full of energy and cheerful as she drove to her interview on this lovely day. Her situation quickly changed, though, when she was stopped by a police officer for having broken brake lights. Then she videotaped him in secret. It will shock you what he did. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. Tiana drove through the crowded streets on her route to her interview on a bright and beautiful morning. She was tightly gripping the wheel and navigating the car through the early traffic, bobbing her head in time to the music coming from the audio. This was the first positive news she had heard in a long time, and as she drove, she grinned to herself. She'd been waiting a long time for a day like this, and now that it was finally here and she was on the verge of having it, she was overcome with joy. Nothing could go wrong at all because so much work had gone into getting her ready for this day. She was prepared for whatever the day had in store for her. The morning was going to take a severe turn that Tiana was sadly not prepared for. She was shocked to notice a siren's blinking lights in her rearview mirror when she happened to peek at it while driving. Perplexed, she questioned whether they were police. When she turned to face the side mirror nearest her, she saw the police car that was pursuing her closely. The sound of sirens going off suddenly filled the air. The officer was now proactively requesting that she stop. She attempted to restrain herself and held fast to the wheel. She was baffled as to why she was being stopped. She was aware that she had traveled below the speed limit, and she was at a loss for what may make the police stop her. She worried if she would be late for the interview and felt a terrible sense. Tiana eventually stopped and pulled over to the side of the road. All she wanted to do was finish it and move on. She saw the policeman approach her car with her side mirror as he got out of the car. Without delay, she fumbled in the glove box to retrieve her paperwork. She quickly communicated her need to the police officer by holding them out to him as soon as he stopped next to her window. She was shocked to learn that the policeman had not taken the documents from her. It wasn't the reason he'd pulled her over, he reminded her, so put everything back in the glove box. Tiana gave him a shocked look. She then carefully put the papers back. As she attempted to think of anything that may have caught the police officer's eye, her thoughts were racing. Glancing around, she spotted the name pinned on his chest. The text said, "Officer Jason." She asked the man, keeping her voice down, what she had done wrong for him to pull her over. After giving her a quick inspection, he informed her that her taillights were broken and would not turn on while she was driving. Tiana's mood declined even more while he talked to her because she came to the horrifying realization that Jason was going to put her on hold. Tiana's interactions with the police have never actually been extensive. She didn't really start interacting with them until she acquired her first automobile. But even then, their interactions were usually fleeting and nothing significant ever occurred. She was experiencing a serious problem with a police officer for the first time, and she didn't understand why it had to occur on the day of her interview. It seemed as though the elements were conspiring against her to foil her schemes. Tiana was excited about this interview for more reasons than simply the fact that she would be getting a job at last. She was going to make significant financial sacrifices for her parents, which was another reason. She desired to assume parental duties for her younger siblings. This included education, food, and other necessities. The family was currently going through a pretty tough time, so she wanted to help them out. After her mother was injured in an accident, the family's medical expenses accounted for the majority of their income. The family was penniless, and her father was having difficulty making ends meet by the time her mother was released from the hospital. Eventually, he had to work more than one job to keep things going. However, it never seemed like enough, regardless of how hard he worked or how much money he made. All of it seemed little in comparison to the family's mounting mountain of expenses. Tiana had been at home throughout this time since she had left her prior work to assist in caring for her mother while she was in the hospital. Observing their financial struggles led her to make the decision to return to the workforce. She originally thought about going back to her previous employment. She was accepted back, albeit at a salary that was somewhat higher than her previous one. It was unjust. She understood that accepting the job would not fix anything since it was just too little for her and her family, and it was just barely above the minimum wage. She soon began looking for work, Despite attending many seminars and interviews since the start of the year, she had not received any positive feedback. All of them assured her that they would contact her again, and that was all. She never gave up looking, and they never responded to her. However, she remained upbeat despite not receiving any answers. Rather, it profoundly inspired her. She wanted to make sure she was prepared since she knew a call from someone would come at some point. She made sure that her clothing were always ready to go on demand. It was not just cleaned and dried. In addition, it was carefully folded, ironed, and put in a reachable spot. Not only that, but she also made sure her automobile was in excellent shape. She could easily picture herself receiving an invitation to an interview, only to find out that her car broke down and she was unable to attend. She also made sure all of her paperwork was ready and in order, since she was aware that a small issue may turn into a major one. She had figured everything out. She thought she had everything worked out perfectly. But the incident that would completely upend her big day began more than a month prior to the interview. It was the first time she had realized her taillights weren't working properly. She knew it was illegal to drive without them, so it was a major concern when they failed to activate when she applied the brakes. She brought the automobile to her mechanic after deciding to get it mended. But she didn't anticipate the kind of welcome she received there. To test the lights once they were fixed, they charged her an astounding $600. Tiana attempted to get them to lower their pricing because this was too costly. Before they could test it, they asked that she pay the amount, which she declined. Tiana ultimately had to let them go. She was unable to thoroughly test the lights once they were repaired. Furthermore, she was unaware that there was a problem with the lights since, based on her tests, they functioned flawlessly, and she thought that they were doing their job. She carried on with her life, going to interviews and submitting applications for employment. But no matter how hard she tried, it seemed like life was determined to keep her from moving on. She eventually lost hope at the lack of progress and began to think about going back to her previous job, even for the pitiful salary they were giving. She was willing to take on anything at all at that point to help the family financially. She was cooking for her mother when, seemingly out of the blue, she received an email asking her to an interview. She was informed that the interview was set for the following day and that she needed to be by 9 a.m. Tiana was thrilled to hear that she had at last received a positive reaction. She had passed the first interview if she was invited for a second one. She was so meticulous that by the next morning, her clothing were ready and ironed. She prepared herself in no time at all. She was feeling extremely positive about everything that was happening to her and herself, so she was off and running. But the moment Jason pulled her over, events took a different turn. She glanced at him incredulously as she listened to him inform her that her brake lights were broken. Since she had only corrected them a month prior, she was certain he was mistaken and informed him as such. However, he argued that just because they were broken, the vehicle wasn't fit for use on the road. When she checked herself, she discovered that her lights were out. She found it hard to believe. Angry, she gave herself a whack on the head. Even though she knew this would take longer than expected, she was still trying to do it as soon as possible. She went up to Jason and asked whether he would understand. She informed him about the shady price the technician had charged her when she had brought the car in for the same issue. After she finished, Jason just remained silent for a moment. Then he abruptly ordered her to unlock her trunk. This was an unusual request that took her by surprise. She was mistaken in her assumption that he would alter his mind and let her leave after hearing her narrative. She let out a defeated sigh, opened the trunk, and observed him making his way to the back of the vehicle. But she immediately followed him and took out her phone. In an attempt to conceal her actions, she turned on her camera and started to capture every action Jason took. She simply wasn't comfortable with the course that things were going in. She was shocked to learn that Jason had done nothing dubious. He proceeded to work on the brake lights instead. His sole means of accessing. He begged her to open the trunk since that was the only way he could get to them. He tried to figure out what was wrong for a few minutes, going from one brake light to the next. He then instructed her to turn on the car's lights and start it up. She followed his instructions, but the lights didn't turn on. She immediately opened the bonnet when he requested her to. He headed there to do some more tweaking. As he worked his way through the contents of her hat, Tiana could only hear faint thuds and clicks from where she was standing, videotaping the entire event. Then, he gave up after 10 or so minutes. It was evident that the problem was not a little one. The lights were just not turning on. He had now witnessed firsthand that Tiana had definitely received subpar service. She was incensed to hear this from him, as it meant she had been duped by the mechanic. She was certain that the reason was because, although having paid them in full for that specific task, they performed dreadful work for her, and she refused to test the lights for $600. About half an hour later, Jason made the decision to release her. Driving without lights puts her and other drivers in risk. Therefore, he advised her to install them as soon as possible. She said she would fix it the next day. After that, she quickly got into the car and left. She was afraid she would be late because 30 minutes had passed. Even in her haste, Tiana didn't go above the speed limit. She made easy work of the traffic, and she didn't stop until she arrived at the company's parking lot. She felt ready for the interview and went in with a strong sense of confidence, which paid off. She received an offer of employment after the interview went well. Tiana was amazed by her good fortune. She had overcome all odds to land the position in spite of all that had occurred to her and all the challenges she had encountered. She joyfully told her family the news when she arrived home. For them, it was the start of a new chapter in their story because there were a lot of changes in store for the home. Tiana remained awake that night, long after everyone else had gone to bed, thinking about Jason and everything he had done for her. She was aware that other police officers would have immediately written her up instead of taking the time to hear her side of the story. She came to the realization that she couldn't just remain silent about Jason's admirable actions. She felt compelled to inform everyone about it and highlight his excellent police work. Tiana then uploaded the footage of Jason that she had shot online. She discussed everything that had transpired and how he had assisted her in the caption. The post went viral in a matter of hours. The post received a lot of likes and shares, and the nice police officer was the talk of the town. A few days later, Tiana's post was retweeted by Jason's affiliated station. They reminded her that they were dedicated to servicing the community's residents and thanked her for the kind message. Their duties extended beyond apprehending lawbreakers and fining drivers who broke the law. Their primary responsibility was to serve, and Jason had merely been carrying out his job. Their reaction increased the story's popularity, and local TV and radio stations quickly started to broadcast the news. They made contact with her and extended invitations for interviews. She was at a really lovely place at this time. One thing she never got tired of talking about was the kind deed that Jason had performed for her. People in her community were afraid of the police because they believed that one small error may have disastrous consequences. That was the reason she had been dubious about Jason in the first place. But he'd surprised her by deciding to go above and above for her. She was content with everything, particularly the fact that decent people still existed. She was motivated by Jason's actions, which served as a reminder that no matter how terrible things became, there would constantly be cause for optimism for mankind. That conviction was like a lifeline to her. What a lovely tale. Who would have imagined Jason acting like that? In Tiana's situation, how would you have responded? Tell us in the comments section below. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.